Hi, my name is Paul Keats. I post some bits and pieces on Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp and everything else with regards to things that I'm doing. I'm a fundraiser for several charities. I fundraise for Help for Heroes, as well as Scope, prostate cancer, a lot of charities I've fundraised for over the years. And when I do put these things up online with regards to the things I've done, I've done mountain climbs, I've done bike rides, I've done the 100-mile London bike ride, I've run marathons, and I've entered into triathlons. I'm not a person that this comes easy to be totally honest. Every single thing that I've challenged myself to do has been that, it's been a challenge. And when I put these things up online, I get feedback, some good, most of it's good, to be totally honest. I very rarely hear anything bad. But one word keeps coming up, which I have difficulty with, and that's inspirational, or an inspiration. Now, I can understand that, the things I do are just things I do. It's just me. It all started, let's go back, let's tell you a bit of my history and why I started doing all of these things. 6 years ago, I was injured. I'm a martial arts instructor. I teach karate, and I'm also learning all the time. And on this occasion, I was working with a good friend of mine, one of the other instructors in our club, and we were demonstrating a technique, and put it simply, it's what's called a scissor kick. And this is what it is, although the guys doing this demonstration are not me and my colleague. It looks fairly simple, doesn't it? No big dramas as far as this is concerned, but what you've got to remember is that's doing under controlled circumstances. When you use this technique in real time, it can be very, very devastating. Unfortunately, I learnt that the hard way. Now, on this occasion, I was the person being taken down. My colleague was the one who's doing the scissor sweep. And just as he was actioning the sweep, one of the students asked a question that we were demonstrating to, and instead of me rolling with the takedown, I stood up. And as I stood up, I was taken with the sweep. Now, the difference between being ready for it and being unready for it is quite devastating. I landed full force backwards. I hit the back of my head on the mats. We had crash mats out, and it was a big jolt. Now, I thought I had a bit of whiplash. So we just carried on, shook it off and carried on training. Now, several days later, I found that I was losing feeling in my left side. I went to the hospital and they discharged me. They did a few checks, said I was fine, I was fit and well, and they discharged me. 2 days later, I was back in because it was getting worse. This time when I went in, the person on the reception, the triage nurse, just happened to be a nurse from the stroke unit, and she took one look at me and said, "You're going straight in." And they did a CT scan on me, and they found that I had a bleed on the brain. Now, I was blue lighted. I was rushed to Queen's Hospital in Romford, where they performed an operation to relieve the pressure on my brain, because if they hadn't have done, basically I would have died. And that's the result of these things. Again, if you can see them, I've got 2 holes in my head, and I had a drain coming out here. This is the picture of it, one of the pictures of the drain. So really, I've got a bowling ball for a head. So you can put your fingers in there and you could throw me out of a room if you really wanted to. And I got over that. And I did some rehabilitation, I did some exercise, and I found that the more I trained myself, the easier I found it. I don't take instructions very, very well, unfortunately, which was fine. I was alive. That was the key thing, I was alive. And a few months later, I started to get some very, very bad headaches. So I went back into the hospital and they did a further CT scan on me. But this time they actually found an aneurysm, and that's a bubble on the blood vessels in the brain. I was again, unfortunately, blue lighted in the ambulance from my local hospital to Queen's Hospital in Romford, which are specialists in neurological issues, brain trauma. And I was again told by a doctor there, a young doctor, who said that they were going to have to operate, and I was a bit challenged with that. I'd already been through this, and he sat me down and he said, "Listen, Mr. Keats, I've got to tell you that you have to understand, if that aneurysm bursts, you've got an 80% chance of dying." So 80-20, the odds aren't that good. So I said, "Go ahead, let's do it." And as a result of that, I ended up having another operation, which is why you can see a scar here. I had a craniotomy. So they opened up the skull and they clipped the aneurysm, stitched me back together again, which is fine. The downside though, there was, unfortunately, while I was on the operating, they had to isolate my carotid artery, the main blood flow to the brain, or part of it, to the right hand side of my brain. And so on the operating table I had a stroke, a mini stroke, which was it was quite a minor one. But when I came round after the operation, the first thing I thought is, I'm alive, which is always good, which is a positive thought. But then the nurse had to explain to me that I'd had a stroke on the operating table, and they would wait to see how badly affected I was. I was quite badly affected by that minor stroke. I couldn't walk. I was partially paralysed down my left-hand side. I had a degree of what's called spasticity, which is where your hands are stuck in that position. And again, this was extremely worrying. But I do a thing called NLP. I'm an NLP practitioner, neuro-linguistic programming, and I know to some degree how the brain works, and I know that we have the capability of redirecting the processes in our brain. It's what's called neuroplasticity. The problem I had is parts of my brain was dead because of the stroke. There was only mine, the little tiniest parts. But when you continuously do something again and again and again, it builds its own neural pathways. And so I started training again. I started with little things in the hospital, first trying to pick things up. I was using coins to pick up, and then they put me onto building bricks. But my main concern was walking and getting back to fitness. So I would get out every morning and I would do continuously, day after day, I would do exercises just to try and get me back to what I was, where I wanted to be. Because one of the things that I like to believe is I've always got an end target, an end game. There's something I have to go towards. You always have to have something that you're aiming for. Once you get there, you find something else to aim for. So my first thing was to get movement back in my hands, and that came fairly rapidly, to be totally honest, and the movement started. But I was on, firstly, walking wise, I was on a Zimmer frame, and every day I'd try and get out. I'd walk around the wards. You know, I'd actually make time to talk to people on the way around, and I'd get up and I'd do squats to holding onto the bed. So I'd be up and down doing my squats every morning, and it became quite of a not a laugh, but it was a routine that other people were now watching in the ward. And some people were going, you know, I don't know why you're doing that. You know, just give yourself a chance and let yourself rest, which we all need rest. But I'm in the mindset that I have to do stuff. I have to be able to push myself because I know that I'm capable of so much more than your brain thinks. So I worked on that, and by the time I left the hospital, which was 2 months later, I was walking on crutches, and I was given the task to go to rehabilitation with physio in where I live. And I will remember with this physio, and he said to me, Mr. Keats, he said, I'm here to help you get over the stroke and see where we can take you. And he asked me a question. He says, where do you want to be in 12 months' time? Well, I said, well, I want to be back to normal, what I was like before. And he smiled at me, which unfortunately is not a good thing to do, because I thought, why the hell's he smiling? Yeah. And when he turned around and says, realistically, let's face this, you've had a stroke. So realistically, where do you want to be or expect to be in 12 months' time? And this riled me a bit. And I said, I want to be back to normal. I want to be walking. I want to be doing everything I've previously done. And he turned around to me again with a smile. And he said, I'll tell you what. He said, I will have you walking with one walking stick in 12 months' time. And I thought, I'm never going to walk with a walking stick, because the walking stick he brought was an old person's walking stick, and I don't see myself as an old person. I still don't. This was, 6 years ago. I'm 61 now. I'm not an old person, I'm me. And he had this curved handle walking stick, and he said, I'll have you walking with one walking stick. And I said, no. I said, I'll tell you what I'll be doing in 12 months' time. And where the hell this came from, I have no idea. I said, 12 months' time, I'll climb a mountain. And he just sort of looked at me. I said, and I will not have a walking stick. 9 months later, it was September, I climbed Mount Snowdon with several of my friends, colleagues and family. And we climbed the mountain to raise money for Help for Heroes. And we did it in a 70-mile-an-hour winds. When we started, it wasn't too bad. But by the time we actually got to the top of Mount Snowdon, they'd closed down the mountain, they'd shut down the railway, and we were in a massive gale. And it was frightening, it was scary, because we had children with us as well, which was pretty daunting. But we did it. We all got there, we did it. And that was a big moment for me. But I'd also started at that point in time raising money for Help for Heroes by another way. Because one of the things I wanted to do was work up some upper body strength and leg strength. So apart from going to the gym, I also started doing the 22 press-up challenge that was going around at the time. And it was 22 for the 22. So we did 22 press-ups every day for 22 days. And my aim was to do the last day on the top of Mount Snowdon and do the 22 push-ups. But when we got there, unfortunately, it was so crowded, it was so busy, it was so wet, windy, we didn't do it, or I didn't do it. I was just too fatigued. So I never got to do the 22 press-ups on there when we climbed it. So I climbed it the next year and did them then. So is that inspirational? Or is it an irritation for people? Because I kept posting stuff and I kept trying to raise money. And some might say it's inspirational. I personally just think it's me being pig-headed. But I'll leave that to you, because I've got other stuff to tell you about as well.